You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that just love talking about the Pack. We are not getting into national sports media talking points and nonsense. We're sticking with real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and of course now sorting through all the drama and the rumors and the draft of the off season. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. And most importantly, jump on over to the Packers Talk YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it for bonus points. We would certainly love that. All of you guys joining us, listening and subscribing, we certainly love you. Thank you so much for your support. And we're going to have some fun this evening here. We got the NFL Combine coming up. So there's plenty of fog of war going on. As much that can be said without saying anything at all is what's basically happening. So we did get a few words from Gute today that I think maybe we can take some things from. But, you know, again, that's what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to say as much and as little at the same time. So we're going to break that down, chop it up, see what we can find in there, and then also talk a little bit about the guys that are about to hit the field this week and work out. Who are we most looking forward to? Who has the most to gain? What's happening this week? Why is it important? We're going to talk about it. But first, we got to have a message from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King, of course. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Good evening, Tim. How we doing, sir?
Good evening, Miles. Doing good. We've had some football to talk about. I mean, it's not on the field, but we're getting closer. Yeah, it's draft season. It's free agency season. Starting to build that team for 2025. So, yeah, some news.
60th Super Bowl champion.
Let's hope so. And yeah, some news kind of trickling in here and there, but it's kind of like it's starting to ramp up a little bit with draft stuff. And Combine week is always when you hear a lot of the rumors about who's going to be available, who's signing, who's leaving, all that stuff, because everybody's tampering. Everybody's talking to everyone, agents and GMs and all that stuff going on down in Indianapolis. So, yeah, we're starting to pick back up. There's not much of a break in the NFL, but starting to pick back up on the off season now.
Absolutely. We'll start to hear some rumors, and that's where I'll just point back to, like, you know, I even believe that stuff less now after my Shrine Bowl experience, where it's just like really, really difficult to talk to Packers people. Like, they just protect their people. They don't want to talk to you. I think even Gute, like today, he said something along the lines of that in his press conference, you know, where it's like, yeah, we don't really pay much attention to you know, player media interaction and all that. It doesn't really mean much of, like, I think he understands that they've got their information pretty well locked up. I think he's pretty confident that real stuff doesn't get out very much unless they know and want it to. I don't think he worries much about that.
No, I don't think he worries. I mean, just you can see it. Not much gets out. He learned that from Ted Thompson, because nothing got out with Ted Thompson. I mean,
right.
There were people that were very close to him in that building, his close advisors, that didn't know what the heck he was going to do or what he was thinking. So Brian's taken that. Very little gets out, and that's fine, you know, but there's a lot of things that sometimes, though, I will say, when he does talk, he has mastered the art of saying a lot without really saying anything, but there's little things in there that he'll kind of tell you, and it's not real obvious. You kind of got to go back and listen or read what he said and realize, okay, yeah, he's telling us something there. And I think we got a little bit of that today. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to give you much, But there are little nuggets you can pick up on as far as maybe what he's thinking and where he's headed with how he builds this roster going forward.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously the hot topic that everybody wants to at least get an update on is Jair Alexander, which I thought it was interesting that he virtually repeated himself from the end of season press conference and what he said there. So we can kind of touch on that. But yeah, there's going to be some things we can learn this week that, I'm excited about. And we know that Gute does these things, right? Like the measurables do matter in certain ways. They're not king. They're not all that matters, but they do matter. So I'm looking forward to seeing if there's anything we can take this week to learn who's going to be more of a Gute guy, right? Where are those raw scores coming out of, and where do they matter versus where do they not matter as much? We've certainly seen him go away from that on a few occasions there. Something else we can probably speculate on a little bit later is a certain Bills receiver that just got a contract, and Andy Herman made an interesting comp that probably will impact one of the Packers receivers. So we can definitely touch on that. But yeah, man, what did you find most interesting about Gutey's comments on this one? I mean, like, was there anything real? Like, what was the most real thing for you that you took out of it?
So I mean, I guess there's a couple things you mentioned, Jair. He didn't give you a whole lot on that, but the fact that he was asked first of all, the press conference he did at the combine was almost worthless because we couldn't hear the questions that he was being asked.
That was disappointing. That was very disappointing.
It's ridiculous. So you don't even know what he's answering, but you kind of go back. You got to go back and read what he said to the local press because he talked to them before that main press conference. So I think more came out of that than his actual one at the podium at the combine. And he was asked about Jair, point blank, kind of like, is he going to be on the team next year? And he said, we'll see. We're working through that. Jair's got 2 years left on his contract. If he was going to be on the team next year, you would just say, yeah, he's going to be on the team. Like, do they have to go through? And is Jordan Love going to be on the team next year? Like, he's not going to say, we'll see. He's going to say, what are you, crazy? Of course. Like,
every guy that's
under contract. Yeah. Like, do we have to go? Like, he's not going to say that about a lot of guys on the roster. So that kind of stuck out to me. It was like, we'll see. And I know if they intend to bring him back, which I don't think they do, but if they did, they got to do something with his contract because he's only played 16 games out of 37 games that they've played the last 2 years. Like, and he's making a ton of money. Like, they would have to adjust his contract. So maybe that's part of it. Like, he doesn't want to come out and be like, yeah, he's definitely going to be back because he's trying to get him to take a pay cut. And, he mentioned too that he's been talking with his agent. So maybe that is part of it. I think it's more so like he just doesn't want to come out and say, we're moving on because maybe there's a team out there that'll throw him, a late round draft pick to pick up Jair so that he doesn't have to cut him. But yeah, there's nothing definitive about Jair, but it doesn't feel like good vibes that he's going to be back next year, which at this point is not surprising. The other thing that I took out of it that made me feel good because I was a little bit worried, and that's the defensive line. I kind of, Gutey, when he had talked at the end of the season, talked up those guys and how much he likes them. We know how much they have invested, first round picks, and they paid Kenny Clark, they paid Rashawn Gary. They really like those guys, and they made the coaching change on the defensive line. So you and I have talked about it. Like, the fear is kind of like, don't just stop with a coaching change. Like, you need to add real players. And he kind of came out and he, didn't say that specifically, of course, but he said that we need to affect the quarterback with 4 guys. It has to be more consistent. We need to be able to control the game. We got to get better if we're going to accomplish our goals. That was all about the defensive line and the pass rushers. That to me says like he knows there's a problem. They're going to address it. And I also feel like that's more of a, we're going to get somebody at that position, not we're going to draft somebody and it's going to take them 3 years to develop sort of thing. Like, they may do that, but it's going to be, hey, we're going to draft a guy. It may take him 2 or 3 years, but we're also going to get a veteran that's going to come in and be immediate help for this team. And I'm not saying that's Myles Garrett because that's not happening in Green Bay. But I feel like they know that that's a problem and they're going to address it with outside bodies, not just a coaching change or not just a draft pick who isn't ready to play in year one. Like, I think that's an immediate focus for them, and it should be. But to kind of hear that, not to him say that directly, but you got to read between the lines with Gutey.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. So that to me was probably the biggest takeaway I had from what he had to say today. What about you? Was there anything that really stood out to you as far as any updates he gave or any comments he made?
Not really. It really was tough to hear the conversation or the questions. I mean, but when it came to Jair Alexander, there was a few things that I think you could probably take something from. For one, he really doesn't hold any weight with, or doesn't allow player interactions with media to hold much weight with him. I think that was directed at Jair's comments to the media at the end of the season. I think he was basically, from my perspective, and I'm happy to be called nuts or whatever, but I think that was basically him confirming that Jair was just trolling you guys. Like, I don't really care what he has to say about whether he'll be back or not next year. That's not really up to him. It's kind of what I took from that. And this really reminds me of the Aaron Rodgers situation in 2021 when Shefty the Clown comes out and says, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers' days in Green Bay are done. They're done." It's just like, I mean, but why? Like, says who? Like,
Well,
because the Packers are pretty, like, at that point, they were like, yeah, we're not trading him. It's like, all right, well, if they're not trading him, then he's going to have to retire. Or, if his days in Green Bay are done, you're going to have to sit and not play football for a few years. You don't get to just walk out of Green Bay and go play somewhere else. And lo and behold, what happened? That's what happened, So I kind of look at it like that. Like you're saying, he's got 2 years left on his contract. This is fog of war season. And I think one reason that the Goot would be non-committal about plans with Jair is because of the cornerbacks in this draft and free agency. I mean, any plan at all that he has for Jair definitely affects what people think about his draft board and his free agency plans. So he really can't commit to anything. He can't give you anything different than what he's already given you, right? Which is what I said. He's basically copied what he said at the end of his end of season press conference. One of the reasons I don't think that they're in a hurry to move Jair the way that everybody else seems to is there's just not a lot to turn to. The draft has got a couple guys you could make a move for, but it's just there doesn't seem like a lot to replenish that with. If you're going to send a guy out, what bodies are you bringing back in? There's a couple free agents, but you can't guarantee you're going to sign those guys. There's a couple draft, guys in the class. It doesn't look like a good replenishment cabinet. So you may not this offseason be as much of a hurry to move him as maybe a different offseason where there's more options to replace him.
Well, I just think I don't think Gutey's looking at it like that. I think it's just simply like, this is the situation we're in with Jair, so we're going to move on and we'll find other guys. Like, they really like Keyshawn Nixon, and he kind of had some nice things to say.
That's one guy. Like,
that's one guy
where you need 3 cornerbacks to be on the field.
They did pretty well. I mean, again, I think they need help at corner, but they did pretty well if you look at it with the guys they had last year. Like, they weren't getting torched, right? So I think they like Nixon. I think they feel confident that they can find 1 or 2 in the draft. And I think they may also explore it in free agency. And I think they just look at Jair's situation like he can't stay healthy. He's no longer worth the contract that he's on. It's just time to move on. And I think that's just their philosophy. I also think, and this is something that kind of plays into it, is there's no like deadline with Jair because his contract is what it is. There's no like a bonus, like, hey,
it's the same thing with Rodgers in 21.
Right. There's no bonus as of like March 12th, the start of the league year. Like, they can sit on him as long as they want to, really. Right. Like, I don't think they're going to do that. I think the decision will be made and he'll be let go at the start of the league year or right before it. But if they wanted to, they could kind of string it out and do you want to take a pay cut? No. Okay. Well, we're going to hold on to you. And once, the first week or 2 weeks of free agency, everybody's already spent their money. We'll cut you loose then, and like you're not going to get that much on the open market. Like they could play hardball with him if they wanted to. I don't think they're going to do that, but it's just interesting. There's no deadline, so in a way they could hold on to him. They could sign.
That's why I don't think they'll make a move, because there's nothing forcing them to do so.
Well,
unless they get some kind of compensation offered where it's like, hey, like with Rasul Douglas, they clearly thought getting a 3rd-round pick for him was a great value. Look, we got to do it. And we're all looking around going, geez, that was a jarring move at a weird time. Like, my goodness. It's like, all right. Turned out to be an okay move. I still, I like Rasul Douglas, but you got a 3rd-round pick for him. That's great. They
ain't getting a 3rd for Jair. If they could get a 3rd for Jair, I think they would. Gutey would do handstands.
Well, but that's what I mean is you're in a place where you need bodies at that position, and you don't have anything forcing you to move that guy. So if you don't get the compensation you want, I don't think you cut him. Because to your point, they've already said they can afford it. They don't have to do anything. They can afford him next year without making any moves. They can ask him to take a pay cut, and who's to say he won't? I mean, he got a big contract. He's not unrealistic about it. Sounds like he's frustrated, wants to get on the field. Who's to say he won't take a pay cut?
They could hold him, and who's at the beginning of free agency. Maybe they sign the guy that they like. There's a few guys.
See
out
what
there.
you get,
and
then you can make a move.
We'll move on from. Maybe that's the move, but yeah, I'd be surprised. I'd be really surprised if he's back. It just doesn't seem like it. It seems like he knows it. The organization knows it, even the players, and they're just ready to move on from him. So, as far as the timing, that'll be interesting. And when it actually happens, because I don't think it's going to be, this week or next week. I think it'll be closer to the start of free agency, and maybe even after free agency starts.
Unless they get an offer for him that, again, great value, they didn't expect. I don't think you'll see anything happen until after they know what they've gotten. Yeah, to your point, like if you go out, you get the guy you want in free agency, whoever that is. I don't think it's DJ Reed. I know a lot of people like DJ Reed. I don't think he's the guy.
He's too small.
Yeah, he's too small, and he is gonna probably get overpaid a little bit. Being, I think he's perceivably the best cornerback on the market. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean. I don't think that that's the guy. I think there are a couple of guys that make sense. Charvarius Ward's one of them. We can go deeper into that later, but I think that the way Gutey does this is, if he can get what he needs, then he will be willing to cut losses and subtract a body there. But I think at a position right now where you need bodies, and he will be healthy going into training camp, presumably. I mean, he was close to it before, right? Now you get a full off season to really get healed up. He should be healthy going into training, and they'll have that prognosis, right? Like, so if the training staff and everybody else, they get 3rd, 4th, 5th opinions, everybody says, good to go, good to go, good to go. Yeah, I just don't think that there's anything forcing you to move the guy. And if you can afford him to keep him, when he's on the field, he's one of the best ones. You get there and you're like, all right, if he's good to go in training camp, you got to keep the guy. So I just think a lot has to still be seen before you can really just understand what the impetus is going to be to move him, if that's what happens. It just wouldn't make any sense to do it right now. Like there's not any reason to do it right now.
No, they have some time. But here's a question for you. Once they do cut him loose, do you think the Lions bid the Vikings for him, or do you think he just goes right to Minnesota?
I think the Lions would really, really try to snag him. He's got the Lions type of mentality, like that dog. Like, and I just don't want to see that. I know there's so many of you guys that you're just ready to move on from Jair, and I'm just telling you, you don't want to see him in another uniform. He's going to come back, and he's going to be as good as he was before, and he's going to be a nightmare for you.
Well, but he might only be that good for 7 games.
I hear you. I've seen guys get hurt. They come back and then they're healthy again for a while. It's definitely.
But he's been hurt. He's been hurt a lot.
It's a possibility. But let's check in here. Comments are getting active. Our friend R Showers live from Longview, Texas tonight. Fired up to hear you guys. Hey, we're fired up that you're here. R. Thanks for being with us, man. Let's see here. We got a good question from Bill Patsis. If I said your name wrong, Bill, I apologize. Says, what question would you have asked Gutey today? So, Tim, how about you first? What question would you have asked him?
That's a good one. It would have. That's really good. I probably along the lines of like, what do you envision for the defensive line going forward? Like, I know they like their guys, but what do you want out of it? What do you want out of them? Like, how do they improve, and what are you looking for to improve? I know he's not going to give you names, but like, what type of players are you looking for? And I think somebody, again, in the pre-press conference gathering with the local media, they did ask him about like lighter edge rushers and how the Packers usually don't go for those guys, and he gave pretty good answer of like, yeah, you get excited about these guys that are 230, 240, and they go out there and for 20 snaps a game, they do a lot. But when somebody else gets injured and they all of a sudden got to play 40 snaps, how are they going to hold up against a 320-pound left tackle down after down?
Yeah.
And I think that right there is what
the
Packers believe in, right? And they just
you get your 260, 270-pound guys. That's what you want.
And we'll get into the combine stuff, but that's why it's important to look at some of these measurements, because I know there's going to be people that are going to bring up certain edge rushers and be like, yeah, man, he would be great in Green Bay. Well, if he's 240, forget about it. They're not drafting him. Maybe they take a late round guy because, some of these late round picks are just lottery tickets, but they're not going to take an early round edge rusher that's 240 pounds. They haven't done it. And just listen to what Gutey said. Like, that's not what they're looking for.
Right.
They want the bigger dudes. But yeah, I think my question would have been along those lines as far as, edge rushers and the defensive line, but maybe just the overall pass defense, because they have needs at corner. They have needs up front on the line. Like, what do you need to see? Like, there was progress there and there was positions last year and obviously with the scheme change, but you need more out of those guys. So like, one, why didn't you get it? And two, like, how do you get it out of the guys you have, and what type of player are you looking to bring in?
Yeah, I think my question would probably be similar to that, but maybe a little bit more broad. I'd probably ask him if he feels like he better understands the type of player, specifically on the defense, that they need for Hafley's system versus how they felt this time last offseason. Was Hafley even hired yet this time? I can't remember when he was hired.
But it was
new. But versus what they knew then and all that. I'd like to see how he answered that. Like, how do you feel about not only what you can add this offseason, but what do you think you need? And that's probably the direction my question would have gone in. But that's a great question, Bill. Appreciate you, sir. Good one. Yeah. Thanks for being with us this evening. And let's see here. But, here we are. We've gotten already a few things that we've taken from the Gutey press conference. There was another thing that he had mentioned. I think somebody asked him if he has been close to trading his first-round pick for a player. And I don't know if that's like throughout his time as a GM or like this offseason or whatever. But I thought that was a pretty fascinating question, and he answered yes, I believe, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, Khalil Mack, when he was traded to the Bears from the Raiders.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a very similar deal to the Bears, and the Raiders decided to take the Bears offer over the Packers, but that would have included a first-round pick. So he's one of them. Maybe there was another one, but Khalil Mack for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, like, not that's a good point to bring up. And that was interesting. And I think it was interesting too. They asked him about not taking the first round receiver. And he again said, like, that's not it's not our philosophy. It just happened.
Yeah.
And he said there's been times he thought it was going to happen. And there were, like, they wanted Justin Jefferson. They wanted Brandon Ayuk instead of Jordan Love. And he went. Christian Watson, they tried to trade back up in the first round and get him. And I think the trade was with the Vikings. The Vikings said no, but they ended up making the trade at the top of the second round. Yeah, at the top of the second round. But they were trying to get back into the first round to take him. So they've tried. They've had the idea to go get some receivers. It just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, and funny enough, Christian Watson could have been a first-round receiver. Jordy Nelson could have been a first-round receiver. They were at the end of the first round and they traded back and took him.
Yeah.
So there's a couple times, and would you have really been mad if they took Jordy Nelson in the first round after the way he turned out? Probably not. I'm not. I wouldn't be. But yeah, I mean, that's why context matters. It matters in a lot of these situations, and I think last offseason showed us a lot of that. I mean, really, like the point that I made about the Aaron Rodgers in 2021 offseason, that context matters. You can't, like, maybe somebody's unhappy. That's fine, but you can't just say, oh, their days are done. Well, not if they don't control that. But there's different things like that where it's like, excuse me, context matters. I think Gutey's drafting context really matters, and so our friend R here has another good one here. I think Gute has been good, but can we say honestly that his first round picks have been bad? I am saying it, and I don't think it is even arguable. They need to adjust their methodology early. And that is where I say context it matters. It matters because, and there's still, judgment out, right? LVN is not a bust. So give the man some time to develop. He could be great. Jordan Morgan, give the guy a break. He got injured. It happens.
Was Jordan Love a bad first round pick?
Yeah, are we mad about that?
Rashawn
I'm
Gary,
not mad about
was
that.
Jair Alexander. Like, no, he hasn't hit on them all, but no GM does. I'm telling you, Howie Roseman just won the Super Bowl, his second one. He took Jalen Reagor one pick ahead of Justin Jefferson.
Yes. Can we?
Who cares? Nah, he's got 2 rings. So
if we're gonna like split hairs, let's make sure we hang this guy too.
Right,
but he's got 2 rings now. We're like, you kind of okay.
How many first round picks did Bill Belichick hit on? Like,
yeah, he missed on a lot of them. They had some weird ones too.
Yeah, like, no, he's not perfect, but there's not a GM that is. And don't forget, most of those first round picks are late in the first round because they've had success. They're not picking in the top 10 where you're going to get these franchise changing guys. But he's done a pretty solid job, especially when you compare it to other GMs around the NFL. And the draft is longer than 1 round. Like, okay, so Zach Tom wasn't a first round pick. Who cares? You still took him in the 4th round.
Exactly.
Okay, Jordan Morgan was hurt as a rookie. Edgerrin Cooper was your 2nd round pick. That's a pretty damn good 2nd round pick. And Jordan Morgan may still work out.
And if you swap the 2, does it matter? You know what I mean?
Like, all it is just their draft position. Like, you look at their draft and be like, man, they've had some good drafts. Like, who cares where they picked them? They picked Rasheed Walker in the 7th round. Like, he's your starting.
I mean, even Valentine, and I know Valentine, like he's kind of fumbling along a little bit, but he still could turn out, and that's a 7th round pick. I will concede, is there some disappointment with the first round picks? Yeah, sure. I mean, even you can make your case for being disappointed by Rashawn Gary, but I think, again, context does matter. Right now, they just started this new defensive system this last offseason. You're year into it. I think what we see this training camp, this next season is going to tell you a lot about guys like Rashawn Gary, guys like LVN, because they should have it now, right? Like, the system shouldn't be the issue. Figuring out how your skills fit within the system shouldn't be the issue. And so that should get fixed. And if it doesn't, then at that point, fine. Like, yeah, we can be disappointed in those players. Sure, you want more from Rashawn Gary at this point, definitely. But I'm not willing to say that Gute's done a bad job because certain things haven't panned out. I think where my evaluation of Gute lands is in what was the thought behind the pick, and even back to Jordan Love, when I was just willing to be like, look, I know everybody wants to hate it, but I'm just going to sit back and see how this one plays out. Like, I'm really going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. And, why? Well, he makes the pick for a reason, right? So what's the reason? And if the reason is because he believes that Jordan Love is just as good as Pat Mahomes, well, I got no problem with that pick if that's what you sincerely believe. Most people probably don't believe that, especially at that point in time. And probably most don't believe that now, and that's fine. I don't know that I believe that now, but Jordan Love's a pretty damn good quarterback and getting better, right? It's not like we've reached some sort of ceiling at this point. So, yeah, I mean, you just got to be able to look at the context around, do you like why they made the pick? Do you like that, the thought behind the pick? And if you can say yes to that, then you got to give the GM the credit there. And if the player pans out or not, well, a lot of that does depend on coaching and who the player is. And then other things. I mean, my goodness, I'll go back to our buddy Amari Rodgers. Everybody had great high hopes for Amari Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers screwed him over mentally. I think he just totally mind effed that guy, which is totally possible, especially with a Hall of Fame quarterback and a rookie receiver. But there's a lot of factors at play there. You just got to ask yourself, in the pick, do you like the thought behind the pick? Because that's what you need to give the GM credit for. And and I know some. Our buddy Daryl here, thanks for joining us, Daryl. You didn't like the Jordan Morgan pick last year, and you think that Gray Zabel can fill in that role on the guard position. I like that guy, Gray Zabel. I think that's a good pick. I like the Jordan Morgan pick, man. I think you got to let this guy get healthy. Football, it's a violent game. Injuries happen, see what you got. But he was one of the first ones we talked about that he could be a Gute guy because of his versatility. Gute doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on versatility today. Jordan Morgan comes back this year. It's like you got another first round pick this year, essentially. It's a red shirt. So anyway, I've been ranting, Tim. You probably got like 5 different things you're trying to comment on over here, but point being, context matters.
Yes, and some guys take longer to develop, and that's just the way it is. And Van Ness, yes, I agree. He hasn't done much. He needs to get better, but he's going into his 3rd year in the league. He's already going to be on his 3rd defensive line coach, on his 2nd scheme. They tried to stand him up as a rookie. Then he's back to putting his hand in the dirt. Like, it's a lot sometimes for a young, they don't all come in and make an instant impact. So give him a little more time. Yes, they need to see more, but to call him a bust or say he's done and get rid of him or anything like that, it's still too soon. And Jordan Morgan, look, if you were saying last year when they picked him, look, you just don't like the pick. You're not saying he's a bust now. Fine. I can say, if at the time, if you didn't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it. But give the guy a chance. I mean, he was playing through, a shoulder injury that kept popping out, learning a new position, never played guard in his life. He's going to need some more time to develop, and they were force-feeding him. It was pretty clear they were trying to make him the starter at right guard, and I think he would have been the starter at some point last season if he didn't have the shoulder injury. So give him some time. And by the way, you need offensive linemen. You don't think Jordan Morgan would have helped them against the Eagles in that playoff game instead of playing Telfort and Glover? It would have been nice to have Jordan Morgan available for that game. So it's 1 year, and you got to let these guys have some time to make progress. Not every first round pick comes in and is, in fact, most rookies, most first round picks do not come in and have great rookie years right away. They're not all pros the second they walk into the NFL. That's a very rare thing. It takes time. That's why it's a draft. That's why it's draft and develop. So yeah, everybody calm down and step back a little bit. They haven't been perfect in the first round. Nobody has. Just do some research on some of these other teams, and look at some of their history, and you'd be like, you know what? It's not so bad in Green Bay.
Well, and the way that some of those players have fallen to the Eagles, there's a little bit of luck involved in that. Those big old Georgia defensive linemen, you shouldn't have let both of them go to the Eagles, guys. There's 31 other teams here. One of y'all could have helped us out.
Just look at Jalen Carter. He fell because there were serious off-field concerns with him.
And look how that turned out.
Right. And he went to the Eagles where they already had his former teammates there. They had Georgia guys, and it's worked out. But not every team was going to be willing to take that chance. And rightfully so. There were some serious, off-field concerns that he had.
Yeah.
But they get lucky, and that's part of it. The Packers got lucky with Aaron Rodgers falling to them, right? They did.
No doubt. I mean, he was a split decision away from being the first overall pick. Yeah, there's definitely a little luck in that.
So, and I think everybody gets so caught up and obsessed with the first round. They forget about the other 6 rounds. Just have some context with things. That's all I'm saying. And don't Don't kill him as a GM because he's done a lot of really good things. Not perfect in the first round, not perfect, in the third round, right? He couldn't hit on third round picks until Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, we had a third round curse we were talking about. Kraft
Right.
just crushed that thing. That's
And
gone.
you're right. So yeah, he's not perfect, but none of them are, and he's done pretty well for himself. And I know you can say Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker. Third, again, give him a little more time to develop. I'm not. I think
Devontae Wyatt has shown some flashes. He's one I'm
shown some
definitely not out
flashes.
on Devontae Wyatt.
He needs to be consistent. Quay, I think we have enough to know what Quay is, but he did show progress last year. Gutey does
Gutey
like
wants
him.
him long term.
Yeah, we might get used to talking about Quay here over the next few years, but yeah, just give the guy some credit for some of the first round picks he has made, right? And yeah, people need to relax a little bit. There's a lot that goes into it.
I was sold on Gute hook, line, and sinker when he made that maneuver to get Jair Alexander and pick up the extra first round pick the next season. I mean, that was just like, I was like, all right, I'm all in on this guy. He's doing stuff like this. Let's go. This is my GM now. So I'm with that. Like, I don't expect him to be 100%, but I love that he is making efforts, man. You can't accuse the guy of just sitting there and, being boring or, taking what he's given or whatever it is. He makes moves. And even some of the moves he doesn't make, it's like, that's good. That was actually better that it didn't go that way. I'm really glad he didn't give up a second round pick for Chase Claypool,
Look at the deadline. Like every year people go crazy if they don't make moves at the deadline. How many of those moves would have worked? Like this year was Marshawn Lattimore, the quarterback who went to Washington. He was hurt. He barely played for him. And when he did, it wasn't that good. Go watch him cover A.J. Brown in the championship game. He got toasted to the point where in the second half, they took him off and put a rookie on A.J. Brown because Lattimore couldn't cover him. And a lot of people Packers fans are saying, why couldn't we make that move? They're better off that they didn't. And yeah, Chase Claypool or Robbie Anderson back in the day, there were several receivers and players that they didn't, and people went nuts. And then those players went to new teams and didn't do anything. Like it was a smart move. So yeah, I think sometimes the best moves you make are the ones that you don't make. And I also, in the comments, Bill again had a great point was that it's challenging to find that talent when you are constantly picking at the bottom of the first round. And it's
a lot more hit or miss there. And it definitely varies by class. Sometimes you've got 40 first round grades. Sometimes you've got 15.
And this is a 15 year.
It's a 15 year. It may be less.
Yeah.
And to our Showers point, well, Tim, then we should trade back and take more shots. Which
okay. Go ahead.
We can't argue with that. And that's been my assessment of this draft class is that, there's not a lot of star power, but man, there's some value. After the first round, there's some serious value to be had where you probably do want more shots in that like second to fifth round range that you can get. In a general drafting philosophy based on where this team is at right now, I mean, an ideal world, no, consolidate your picks and take some higher shots at some quality. That's what I would be wanting. But right now, the guys that are at the top of the first round, you're kind of looking at them going, there's some good ones there, but like, who are you mortgaging the farm for to get up there? There's nobody there that I'm like, just, you got to have, no. And again, great football players there, but nobody that that's going to be worth what it's going to cost to get there, and I think one of the problems and one of the reasons you'll never see the Packers make those types of moves is I think that they look at it as a player to player exchange in a lot of ways. And they're never going to be willing to give up 5 players for 2 or something like that. They really value those shots, those draft picks, whether they're late, draft picks or first round draft picks, so in order to do that, I don't think that the guy is there that you want to root for that. I don't think that there's anybody tempting the Packers to go up to, and the value again from the second round on is strong. There's a lot to pick from across a lot of positions. The one position I don't really like is the cornerback position. I'm not wild about it. The more I look at it, the more I'm like, oh goodness, this is sparse.
Well, and I think to your point too was another thing Gutey said today was he wants more picks, and I think one of the questions was you don't have as many picks as you have recently. His response was yet. Like
there you go.
Be ready for some trade backs, whether that's the first round or different rounds throughout the draft. But yeah, I mean, right now they have 7 picks. They're supposed to get another one, a compensation pick. But that hasn't, they haven't given those out yet. So maybe they end up with 8. But either way, he wants more of the picks. So don't be surprised if they're trading off of 23. We're so far out from the draft, but I would be surprised, I think, to your point, if they traded up, because there's just not enough guys. Unless there was somebody they really liked that was falling in their range, then yeah, maybe they would go up and get them. But one, they don't have that many picks to trade. And it's just one of those drafts where there's not that top of the draft high-end talent. It's more like from picks, say 20 to 50, where there's value there, 20 to 60. And I think that's why they probably would like to, if they could, trade off at 23, go down and maybe pick up 1 or 2 extra picks on Friday, the day 2 of the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they've made similar maneuvers several times in the past, right? Where you're at the back half, in the 20s of the first round, you trade, into the 30s in the second round, which is basically still first round territory talent. At that point, whether the guy you're targeting is going to be in that range or not. And you can pick up an extra 60 to 70 pick range, with an exchange like that, so in a draft like that, or like the one that we're looking at, that's not a bad move at all, right? Go get you an extra second round pick, go get you an extra 4th or 5th round pick, maybe something like that. And then you're picking up some quality players there. Whereas if you did the inverse of that, you're just not going to find the value by going up and trying to get a higher quality player, I don't think. So yeah, I mean, that's a good transition here, man. So who are you most excited about? Who are you looking forward to watching the most this week?
The defensive line, and I put edge rushers in there too, just because I want to see, one, it's an incredibly deep class. I mean, that's probably the deepest position, D-line. I want to see what these guys are measuring in at, number one, because that's obviously a factor. But then how well do they test, the ones that do test in Indianapolis? Because that's something that the Packers obviously care a lot about, are some of the testing numbers that they're going to get. So it's a big need for Green Bay. It's a deep class along the defensive line. That's where, number one is like, let's see what these defensive linemen look like, because I think there's going to be some really eye-opening numbers once these guys are running and doing agility drills. I think there's some real freaks in the class. I mean, we'll see. There's already names trickling out of guys who aren't going to test. They're going to wait to their pro day, but there's just so many D linemen. Like we've
a ton of D linemen.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, I think, Daniel Jeremiah. Not that he's speaking for NFL teams, but just I think he's got 41. Or no, that's how many were invited. I think he's got like 20 to 24 guys that he has starter grades on, whereas last year he had 12.
Yeah.
And they invited like 40 defensive linemen to the combine. I think last year it was like somewhere
between in the 20s.
Between 25 and 30.
It's basically half.
So yeah, I want to see how they test and how many of those are going to fit into the Packers standards, like what they're looking for, because I think there's going to be quite a few. I think it's going to be one of the deeper positions overall, but when you like whittle down the numbers and what the Packers look for, I think that's going to hold as well, where they're going to have, plenty of guys that fall on their board that they like, so that, they can take them early, they can take them often in this draft. So yeah, that's the number one position for me. And the other one, I want to see the corners. I know you mentioned them. You're not real high on them. I think there's some guys. I don't think it's very deep. I think there's a lot of questions because there's several corners that are coming off injuries. Ravel, the kid from Michigan, Johnson, Morrison from Notre Dame. He's coming off a hip injury. Like, how much, we won't know that much about the medicals because they kind of keep that quiet. But some of that news is going to trickle out. We'll see who tests here. So how healthy are they? And then obviously the size is huge for the Packers because we know they like taller cornerbacks, and we know they like cornerbacks that are at least 190 pounds. So how many of these guys measure up? So those two positions for me stand out, but definitely defensive line, because I think there's going to be some freaks out there. I think some of these numbers are going to be ridiculous.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's just going to be loaded with, guys who just test or jumping through the roof and just incredible agility numbers as well. What about you? What are the positions, where you're looking? I know you mentioned corner, but you're not real high on that anyway.
I'm not even going to waste time talking about the cornerback position, guys. I'm just like, there's some guys. And again, after the first round, I think there's some value for sure. Like if Gute goes off and takes a 7th round corner, let's pay attention. Let's go look at that guy. Let's go see who he is. Cause there's some dudes at the back half that are good size, good contributors, just good players, but they're not that star caliber player. So I don't want to say that, they're not going to get a guy out of this draft. I just don't want to get our hopes up that you can go off and replace a Jair Alexander with a pick in this draft. I think that's going to be a tough thing to do. But yeah, so I'm not going to spend too much time. I think it will be worth our time to spend time on these guys after we have some measurables, after you've seen who's healthy enough to do what. If Will Johnson goes out and runs, he looks healthy. That's pretty exciting. There's just Jahdae Brown probably will get some attention. We'll spend more time on the group after we know more about him and who we know to.
That's fair. On. Yeah, absolutely.
But this week, the guys that I'm really looking forward to, and I'll fly over it quick because obviously we're just talking about it, but the interior D line, this is really an anomalous class, right? Like, it's not just better than last year's class. This class is weird. Like, usually there's a few guys that are 6'3", 320 and can move. And there's seriously like 15 guys like that. So I think what you got to watch from this group this week is who can separate themselves. Some of these guys are going to be faster than you'd expect. You're going to get like a BJ Raji type of athleticism. Some of these guys are going to be more explosive. They're going to have impressive jumps. But, like a Derek Harmon is one that I've kind of gravitated towards and talked a little bit about last week. He's 6'5", 310. If a guy like that goes out and runs like a 4.8 40, or maybe whatever he goes out, like he goes out and runs, that is just an impressive sized athletic human right there. Like, there's just a lot to be gained for a guy like that, who right now he's already climbed boards. I think, on Brugler's board, he was originally back in like around the 50s, and now he's up to 21 overall. So he's climbing boards. With a strong combine, that guy probably goes higher, gets a little bit closer to that top 15 range. And so that's where I would look for maybe some separation from the combine for this group, where there's just a ton of physically impressive dudes. But the edge defenders, I'm really looking forward to. That's one that statistically, that group, the freaks do well, right? The freaks translate well to the NFL. So, you want to see who's going to come out this week, who's a freak, who is going to have like a Micah Parsons like performance. Mike Green certainly has a lot of people's attention right now. Abdul Carter, your guy from Penn State, he's at the top of the board there. So there's definitely some really impressive humans to watch from this group. And, you might even learn about a few guys you didn't know about before if they come out and have some really good performances this week. And this is a position that the Packers, obviously, we want to see them add to this group. I'm very optimistic about the way that we feel about this group after this week. Elijah Roberts is one to watch right now. He's 75 overall on Brugler's board, but he has had very impressive PFF grades over the last 2 seasons, not just the last season. He's 6'4", 295. He was at the Shrine Bowl, And he is one of those dudes that I kind of said this about Cooper last year. He plays mean. Like, he's just that guy that when he's across from you, it's like, geez, this guy just has like personal feelings against me. Like, you don't want to go against him, because every rep he is just going to get after you as if he has some real personal feelings there, and I need to go back and watch more of his tape, but he is one that right now he's ranked, to go in that like third, fourth round area. And that's a guy that could be very impressive at the next level, and could really kind of sneak up on you. So this is a fun group. This group goes deep. There's a lot of guys that are going to be fun to watch and see how they do and what attention they get and who climbs the board. But we've talked a lot about defense. We swap over to offense. You can have some fun over there for a minute. I've kind of been soft on this group so far, but the receivers I feel like are a group that with a strong week this week have a lot to gain. A guy like Savion Williams comes to mind, 6'5", 225. I know a lot of you have PTSD over Quentin Johnston. I was a QJ no matter what guy, and he has definitely let us down in the NFL. Hasn't done very well so far. Could still do well down there with the Chargers, but Savion Williams is not QJ. I have determined this. I have fought myself a lot on this. Don't fall for the trap. Don't fall for the trap. He's not QJ. He is not. He can run routes. He looks more like Jamar Chase when the ball is in his hand, than just a tall guy that can jump. Savion Williams is fascinating. He is fascinating. He is a very tempting specimen, we'll say. He comes out and runs like anything south of 4.4 in the combine. He's going to shoot up boards. He's got a catch radius that's nuts. He's a guy that I'm sitting here and I'm just like, I'm begging him, please be what I think you will be in the NFL. And he might be one of those DK Metcalf type guys where you're just looking at it going, he can't be. He can't be that good. So we're just going to let him slide into round 2. And then the rest of the NFL is going to go, how the heck did we let this guy slide into round 2? What happened here? So he's one to watch. There's a lot of guys in this receiver group that could be good. There's certainly some names that have flown around Packers Twitter, but Jalen Royals is one that he had my attention last year. Was off to a great start, got hurt. So if he has a good combine, he could shoot up boards. Really strong film with that one. This is a fun group. This is a fun receiver group. I wish the cornerback group was as good as this receiver group. It doesn't have the star power, but there's a lot of guys. It's another group with a lot of guys. There will be a lot of starters that come out of this group. But yeah, those are probably the ones that I'm looking forward to the most. And I guess I tipped a little bit on what I was about to ask, but like who has the most to gain this week? Those are kind of the groups that I think have the most to gain this week as well. But does that differ for you, Tim? Do you have a difference in opinion about who you think has the most to gain this week?
Yeah, I like your thoughts with the receivers because I think there's some guys that have the ability to definitely move up. And one of them would be Jaden Higgins, who I like from Iowa State. Looked good at the Senior Bowl. He's a bigger receiver. He runs good routes, but
very tempting guy.
Yeah, how fast is he? Because it is a stopwatch position where you need some speed there. And I think if he runs really well, he's got a chance to go top of the second round, maybe sneak into the bottom of the first. He's one. But yeah, I think it's an interesting receiver class in that I think we've kind of gotten used to having some of these like monster guys go in the top 10. Last year was Neighbors and Dunze, and it seems like every year we're getting like receivers that go really high. And this year we're kind of probably not going to have that. McMillan from Arizona is going to go in the first round. I don't know how high he's going to end up going this week. Maybe he runs really well and he ends up being a top 15 or a top 10 pick. But there's a lot of guys that are kind of in that borderline first round into the second round, third round kind of guys. And I think they got a chance to maybe move up, maybe separate themselves a little bit by what they do in Indianapolis. Plus, it's just one of those, it might be one of those things too, where there's just not a lot of receivers at the top. So teams are reaching a little bit to take guys. But yeah, I think receivers are a good position as far as who can, help themselves a lot. And I think offensive line as well. Again, there's tackles, but there's not like last year. Joe Alt came out. Everybody knew this guy's going to be a stud, and he was as a rookie. There's not that guy. Will Campbell from LSU is probably the top guy, but there's some questions about are his arms.
Questions.
Yeah, his arms big enough to play left tackle, which is kind of a silly argument sometimes, but it's true. That's teams look for guys with long arms. Yeah, there's a couple guys coming off the injuries. The kid from Ohio State, Josh Simmons, got hurt. So it'll be interesting, his medical testing. But there's some guys in the offensive line that can separate themselves and get themselves in the first round or bump up higher in the second round as well. There's also guys that you want to see how they look on the field. The kid from North Dakota State, Zabel, we brought up earlier. Is he a guard? Is he a center? I like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. He was a guard. And then Simmons gets hurt, and they kick him from left guard to left tackle. And he was really good. I mean, they won the national championship, and he barely allowed. I don't think he allowed sacks down the stretch. He barely allowed pressures, and his arms are like 35 or 36 inches. So I think if he shows the ability to play left tackle, you already know he can play guard. That's a guy that can help himself a lot as well. So, yeah, I think offensive line is one to watch too, because we may get some of these guys that start separating themselves and start bumping up, based on how they look size-wise and testing-wise this week.
Yeah. And I think that's really what it is. It's like, what's the separation? There's some guys, there's some guys you like. There's some guys that are good at football. How do you start splitting the hairs and what does that look like? So this week definitely settles a lot of that. It'll help maybe turn some attention away from some guys and really let you dig deep into some others. But there's some good names flying around the chat there. Kobe Bryant, our buddy Daryl here, you're on it, man. I could not say enough about him and what he did at the Shrine Bowl. He's one that, if they go outside of their mold for size, because he is a little bit undersized, although, again, you can't really tell him that. I think that's one of those that would tempt them to do that just because the way he plays, it's just very impressive, man. If he were a 200-pound guy, there's a guy you're talking about that's probably tempting you to take him in the first half of the first round. He's just can't say enough about the guy. But there's some good names flying around there. I know I'm poo-pooing on the cornerback class a little bit, but it leaves a lot to be desired, and that's a position of need. I think everybody's willing to agree on that. When we talk about first round busts, I think Eric Stokes is the one I'm most willing to just go ahead and say, yep, it's a bust. Let's let the guy go and just call that one a spade. But, other than that, you want to find at least a decent pool of guys to choose from because you don't know what other teams are going for. Right. And if the number you guys have to choose from, it gets smaller. Other teams are going to be picking from that too. So you feel less confident about being able to get your guy from that group. And the other thing is when Gute goes after a position like he did with safety last year, he triples down. He wants to take three guys at a position. That's where I'm looking at the D-line group going, how do you not take three guys at that position? Like the amount of guys that are in this draft, it'd be irresponsible not to.
Or at least, between free agency and the draft. Yeah, multiple guys.
Yeah. So, but then, that means other guys get squeezed out. Who gets squeezed out? That's the question. We'll figure that out. We got a whole long offseason to figure that stuff out. But yeah, that's who I kind of would look at as far as who's got the most to gain this week is those guys that, and then the positions obviously we left out, quarterback, running back. I don't know that there's a whole lot of guys there that have a lot to gain this week. Maybe in the interviews and the heady side of this thing.
Maybe a little, I'm sorry, maybe a little bit at quarter. I mean, it's not a good quarterback draft, but Shador Sanders isn't throwing this week, and I don't think Cam Ward's going to either. So maybe some of those other guys can impress, and like you said, in the interviews can impress, and maybe bump themselves up. Third round, second round guys. And it's just, teams always need quarterbacks, so they're desperate, but it's not a good quarterback year. But I think there's a chance maybe some guys can help themselves, not necessarily guys that are going to be first round guys, but, day 2, day 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, they definitely can. I mean, a Will Howard is one that right now I'm still not sure why he's being rated as low as he is. I think he's going to sneak up on some things. But yeah, so this week can win, I think, some intelligence points. But, I don't think those positions like linebackers, I don't know that there's a whole lot to be gained in the linebacker group this week. Haven't really put much into the safety group just because, again, we got safeties on safeties in this Packers team here. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of attention placed on that group by Gute's team. Not that they ignore them totally. It's just you kind of deprioritize some of these things when you see the room in the shape that the safety room is in, which is great because last year it wasn't in that kind of shape. But yeah, so those are the positions. I mean, there's a lot of mystery still. We are in the fog of war, right? Like the GMs don't want you to know what they're doing. They don't want you to figure out what they're doing because then other GMs could figure it out too. So a lot of this, you have to, if he's pointing one way, look the other way and see what could be over there because
it's lying season.
Yeah, it is. It's lying season. But we still have some fun with it. Next week we'll dive more into the free agency side of things. That's getting closer and closer to starting. Does that start next week? When did we say that?
No, March 12th, or I think it's the 10th when they can actually start.
That's right.
Talking, but yeah, it'll start getting done the 10th, but it can't be official, I think, till the 12th.
That's right. So, so we'll dive a little bit more into free agency next week and talk more about, who are some options the Packers, might make sense. And again, what are the patterns? What are the tendencies? Who's just not worth paying attention to at all because it just doesn't make any sense. And if I'm the one who says that, then you should pay attention to that person because that's what I said about Josh Jacobs last year. So who knows, man? Maybe I'm some sort of reverse psychic. But anyway, no, we'll have some fun with that next week. There's definitely plenty of guys to talk about. I've taken a look at a few of the guys that are out there and just considering salaries and all that. I think there's plenty to consider, and I would imagine that Gute will be in every conversation. Don't you think?
That's what he says.
That's what he says. He's an honest man, I think, except in lying season, because everybody lies, which makes you honest, kind of, almost. But anyway, we'll be here to have fun with you guys again next week. Don't you worry. We hope you guys come back. We love that you guys come and listen and enjoy this with us. Just a nice little Packers talk, right? You can't get enough of it. There's too much going on this offseason and every offseason. We're not going to stop this thing. We're going to keep going. We're going to be here. Sometimes Monday nights don't work. There's I got kids. Tim got kids. We got families. Stuff's going on. Sometimes it's got to be Tuesday nights. And during the off season, we can be flexible. But we're gonna aim for next Monday night. We're gonna be back next Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Central, streaming live with y'all. If y'all did enjoy this episode with us, please spike that like button for us. Hit the subscribe button. Share the show with your friends. Any other Packers fans shoot a link. Invite them to come hang out. We love talking Pack. You guys are awesome in the comments. You guys are always bringing some good ideas, good names, good things to the conversation. So we appreciate you guys and want y'all to have a good week. But most importantly, we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go Pack!